In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern, taking a look at the tropics, where there is a couple of concerns of development we're going to be going over today. Back-to-back major Arctic blasts on the way, starting early this upcoming week, or I guess ongoing. It is Sunday today, so the beginning of the new week. We're going to see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday particularly, but a lot of it could extend into Thursday, Friday, Saturday for a lot of the East Coast, and then another one maybe on the way for the week after that we're going to be talking about. Let's just dive into things, and we're taking a look at the tropics first off. And the European model is not very bullish on any sort of Gulf activity. We have a little bit of concern in the Caribbean. This moves straight over Mexico, and typically being really far suppressed to the south is not a good sign for major development here. So I would say that this European model, which has been sketchy to say the least this hurricane season, so keep that in mind, but not really showing much in the way of development there. We do see this system, which we see from the National Hurricane Center later on, showing chances of development. This heads towards the Caribbean, very close to the Yucatan Peninsula, eventually perhaps. So a lot of these are heading straight towards it. I think that there is some opportunity for some northern curvature, which would be concerning to say the least. Typically, this time of year, a system moving across the Atlantic like this is going to encounter some issues, obviously, for development in the form of shear, dry air. It could encounter some problems like that, but that does not mean that it will not develop. So we will have to wait and see what happens with this one. Let's take a look at the GFS model, and we see a big, much more different story. First off, we see a lot of these showing the suppressed look in the southern Gulf of Mexico with this system, but we do have a handful that head to the north and show really strong development at times, maybe showing more of a Helene type path. Unfortunately, we do see once it strikes, at least more of an eastern look, which is better news than if it was to head over the Appalachian Mountain Range again. So we do not see that, thankfully. So I don't want to allude to the fact that the Appalachian Mountains are going to see something like they saw with Helene. Obviously, unfortunately, anything is possible in the weather, but we are not really seeing indications of that at this moment. But Florida would be a possible spot to be impacted, which I know that would be just the icing on the cake, of course, or the salt in the wound, I think would be better. But that's still a ways out, something that we're going to be keeping in mind and watching for. Also, we do see a couple of these kind of crossing back off the East Coast and impacting those areas. And this is a very common track for October. Unfortunately, this is pretty plausible as far as what the historical norms would be. So we're going to be watching this very closely. I think there is some interest here, but still the majority showing this suppressed look, and certainly the European model family is on board with that type of a track. So we will see. There's a chance, but it's not a huge one yet. We're going to continue to monitor this, and really this Atlantic system, this particular model, the GFS one, which has been better than the European model, basically has this one dissipating over the middle of what we call our MDR between the Eastern Caribbean and Africa here. So it doesn't really get it out of there without it just fully breaking up, which is good news. Still a chance though, so we will monitor that very closely. As we just take a look at the upcoming patterns, Sunday here today, and we're going to look towards kind of the evening afternoon time. We do see on the boundary of this cold air that is extending southward as we speak, we do see plenty of rainfall and unsettled weather along that area. This is fairly common, and we do see a low over western Pennsylvania, so some stormy weather is around for those areas, and we can see that really dry and warm conditions are prevailing out west, and we call this a positive PNA, and typically this is accompanied by big eastern cooldowns or Arctic blasts, and we are seeing that happen here. This is like the perfect pattern if you're a cold and snow lover, if we saw this in December, January, February, for cold and snow to occur. So keep that in mind, that if we start to see this be the trend, that could be a good sign of things to come. Overall, this is the flow we're going to see over the coming days. So let's just take a look at Monday, and we see everything kind of extends further south. We get this Pennsylvania low turning into a nor'easter nearby the coast of Maine. It's a little bit intense. I mean, we see a 996. I would say it's a typical nor'easter. It's not weak by any means, but it's not a very intense one by any means either. We do see rainfall, wind prevailing, but also mountainous snowfall for the Adirondacks and areas in Canada. Perhaps the Green Mountains and White Mountains will cash in on some snowfall for the higher elevations as well. Overall, stormy weather is accompanying this Arctic blast as it moves southward, as you can tell. As we reach towards Tuesday, everything extends even further south as this thing is just diving and really taking hold of the pattern in the east. We see the jet stream is a little bit inverted with the ridge there. We see a big time trough here in the east. It's going to be the coldest air of the season. It's going to be a very intense Arctic blast, and really there's nothing normal about it. It's going to be very unseasonable, much more in terms of what you would expect to see in November or even early December. So this is a very, very early season cool down, and I'm shocked to say the least. I mean, this is coming out of nowhere, and it's much more intense than what we typically see this time of year. That nor'easter is still hanging out between Maine and Canada, and we're seeing some snowfall for Canada, some rainfall still for a lot of the New England area in there from that system, and overall we're just seeing stormy weather within that cool down still. No surprise there. By Wednesday, we do see this starting to lift off, especially if you're west of the Appalachian Mountains. These areas are currently warming. We still see this kind of like backdoor cold air look along the east, which really just means it's coming from the east and kind of flowing down east of the mountains there. So the east coast should still be rather cool on Wednesday. We do see stormy weather prevailing now for the northwest and western Canada, and this is going to be the big time pattern changer as it's flipping that area from warm and dry to colder and stormier. This warm up is overall going to be on the move towards the east over time. So let's see what happens by Thursday. And what we continue to see is a warming trend in the east, although when we look at these lines, we see that there's still a troughing look along the east coast, so still some cooler air is likely around for these eastern areas. We'll look at the temperatures in a while, but that is still the look there. The west has fully moved into a stormy, cold pattern. We see snowfall around for the Rockies, Cascades there. Definitely a big factor in this warm-up is on the way for the east overall, slowly but surely. By Friday, this is the look, and finally, I would say the East Coast is also warming up. We have a lot of high pressure, and here we see two major high pressure systems, so we kind of flipped. The East is seeing what the West was seeing, and the West is seeing what the East was seeing. It's like a revolving door pattern. We have a major trough in the West and a quite substantial ridge now in the East by this next weekend. We see a low developing over eastern Colorado and some snowfall for Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, really, really prevailing. And overall, the four corner states up through the northern plains are seeing stormy weather, both in the form of rainfall and snowfall, depending on where you're at. By Saturday, we do see a little bit of a frontal boundary wanting to move eastward. So this could be a sign of a colder push towards the east. It doesn't look too intense at this point from what I'm seeing. And we still have a really warm flow here east of that boundary. But we are beginning to see a little warm push to the west, so we could be moving towards this type of pattern, and that could extend eastward. Let's take a look at Sunday. We see that frontal boundary is moving in. I would call it just a typical cold front for this time of year, this one. So we see this really flowing into the central states and eventually towards the east, where we still have this warm push up the east coast, but that should come to an end. We have a really nice dry and warm bubble out west here, which is going to allow for that cold to overall trend towards the east. We do see our tropical system, not the Gulf one, but that one crossing the entire Atlantic. This is the European model, and we saw the European ensembles on board with that system, so we do see that here. As we move towards Monday, we see this cool down takes place for the east, so kind of the beginning of next week will look a lot similar to what we're seeing this upcoming week, just a little less intense, but some cooler air is definitely pushing in here. That is what we're seeing, some stormy weather accompanying it. And really for the west, we're seeing mostly along this jet stream some lower pressure moving through. Snowfall for the mountains, rainfall for the lower elevations for the Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, Northern Plains, and even the southwest of Canada there. Our tropical system is nearby the Bahamas at this point. By the time we reach Tuesday, it's really sitting over the Bahamas still. 972, quite substantial. I mean, that might be a hurricane on this model. So very intense tropical system that this model is trending towards. We end up with a flatter jet stream, still a little bit of a trough over the east coast by Tuesday the 22nd. But again, nothing significant according to this model. Let's go ahead and take a look at the total precipitation, and a couple of areas to note is going to be the Northwest here, kind of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes through the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and then along Florida is your main areas to watch for some above average precipitation. And as we look at it, we kind of see that prevailing here. The Northwest in particular is where the most activity is. We saw storm after storm, pretty major too, moving through that area. And then overall drier for most of the East, which has been the trend for weeks and even months now. But the Great Lakes into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, we are seeing a little bit of average to above average precipitation in some of those areas, and also for Florida here. As we take a look at the total snowfall, we see quite a bit expected. The Great Lakes and Upper Midwest, we're seeing a couple flakes flying from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. And then for the Northeast, we see New York into the New England, the mountainous areas, seeing maybe an inch or two of snowfall, especially the Adirondacks and White Mountains there, where we see those blues popping up, which is indicative of an inch to maybe even up to multiple inches. So some substantial fall-time snowfall could be on the way. And then those mountains in West Virginia seeing a dusting, if anything, so some snowfall for them as well. The Cascades, we're looking at, you know, a couple inches for most mountains. And then as we move into northern Washington, some of those Cascades, we're seeing a foot to maybe 2 feet there for the Washington Cascades. The Rockies here, we're looking at anywhere up to a foot for all of these states here. Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, we're seeing, you know, in the blues about 2 to 6 inches, purple 6 to 10, and then pinks 10 to 20. So yeah, about up to a foot. We do see mostly those darker pinks, which is going to be closer to that 10-inch mark rather than that 20-inch mark there for those mountains. And then Canada, I mean, who isn't seeing snowfall? Maybe Toronto there, but everywhere north of there, I mean, you're looking at a chance of seeing flakes at least. So looking a lot more wintry up there. Here's your temperature pattern. I want to watch this Arctic blast move in, and we're already seeing it. This is by this afternoon. We're seeing the northern plains, upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast already getting this going. Monday, we see it diving southward, and we see significant cold air for a lot of areas, especially here in these greens where we're 10 to 15 degrees below normal, what is normal for this day. And then those purplish blues are 15 to 25 degrees below normal. So a very, very far stretch from what is typical for this particular day. And look at the warmth out west. Again, we noted that earlier, but that is a big driving factor, and we see a lot of it taking place. Tuesday, we see it get even more intense. Those greens are widespread. Tuesday the 15th. Still the east is very, very cool. Wednesday, same story, very cool. Thursday, again, it's a little more exclusive the further east you go, and the west is starting to cool down. Friday is probably the final day of some of that cooler weather. For the southeast, as some warmer air is on the way. And then Saturday here, very neutral, if anything, for the southeast, warmer for the northeast. So as we're working our way into that weekend, there's that little cold front there that we see. So that's going to be, again, Monday, Tuesday. It's nothing significant, but we do see some blues in here. This is what a typical cool down looks like for reference. So for those of you that are like, this is normal for this time of year, this is a normal cool down. You know, 1 to 10 degrees below normal there in those blues is going to be typically what you'd see here in the fall time. The greens and even the purplish blues is nowhere near normal. So I want to show you a model, the GFS model actually, which shows a much more major cool down with this first one. First off, we see much more substantial greens and purplish blues. This is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, seeing some colder lows. But watch this move through. Here's Wednesday, Thursday, into that next weekend. And look at Saturday, Sunday, another major Arctic blast here as we work our way towards that kind of ending of October time frame. Very, very similar to that one that we're seeing in a couple of days. So this model is showing a few major cooldowns here moving forward. Definitely going to be something to watch for and could lead us towards an overall cooler October compared to what is typical. The Atlantic tropics, again, almost nothing going on outside of this area crossing the MDR. We do see a 10% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 30% chance over the next 7 days. We'll have to watch this very closely. It is moving into concerning territory, obviously, the Caribbean, and more concerning would be like the Bahamas. So we'll have to watch this closely. That is a very favorable area for tropical development. And really, if we did see this one pan out, we would be watching the Gulf and the East Coast for potential impacts. Really nowhere would be safe. So this is probably one that we're going to have to watch for days and days to come. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. We do upload every single day, so be sure to subscribe. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload, so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.